The rain poured hard on the landing pads of the spaceport, striking the metal floor like endless needles. An old man moved slowly with his cane, his coat heavy with water, his breath short. The lights above flickered in the storm, and ships roared as they landed and left. He kept walking, ignoring the noise, focused only on reaching the exit gate. His hair was white, his back bent, and his steps unsteady. No one gave him much attention, just another forgotten man wandering in the chaos of a busy port. Then he stopped. His hand tightened around the cane. He felt it before he saw it, eyes watching him, waiting. He lifted his head and saw her. A figure stood in the pouring rain, not moving, as if the storm didn't touch her. She was tall, her skin glowing faintly under the neon lights, her alien features sharper than he remembered, but unmistakable. Her eyes locked on him, wide with something between fear and devotion. For a long moment, neither moved. The storm seemed to pause, the noise of the port fading into silence. She stepped forward slowly, her boots splashing in shallow puddles. She was shivering, but her gaze never broke from his. When she finally reached him, she stopped only a few feet away. He saw her face clearly now, the same face from 15 years ago. The same girl who had disappeared in fire and screams, thought to be dead. His lips parted, but no words came out. He could not breathe. His heart pounded so hard, he feared it would give out. She raised her hand to her chest, trembling, and her voice cracked as she spoke. "It's an honor to serve you again, Captain." The words cut through the storm like a blade. He nearly dropped his cane. Memories rushed into him. The explosion, the broken hull of their old ship, her last scream when she pushed him to the escape pod. He had lived with guilt for 15 years, believing she had died because of him. And now, here she was, alive, standing in front of him, calling him captain again. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but nothing left his lips. He only stared, unable to move. She smiled faintly, but her smile carried years of pain. Her eyes glistened with tears, though the rain washed them away before they could fall. She looked older, harder, but still carried the same fire he remembered from the days she served under him. She took another step closer, and for a moment he thought she would collapse into him. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and held herself like a soldier reporting for duty. The old man shook his head slowly, his voice raspy from age and disbelief. You can't be real." "I'm real," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady enough to cut into his chest. "I never stopped waiting for this day." His knees nearly buckled, and he gripped his cane tighter. The storm around them grew harsher, alarms blaring as a ship prepared for takeoff nearby. The wind whipped his coat, but he did not move. He wanted to reach out and touch her, to see if she was flesh or just a cruel dream sent by his old memories. But fear held him back. Fear that if he touched her, she would vanish again. Her eyes softened, and she tilted her head the way she used to when she wanted his approval after a mission. The sight broke him further. She took a careful step forward, and for the first time in years, she lowered her head in respect. Her voice was low, but the words carried power. "I've come back because you need me." He blinked hard. "Need you? I don't even know how you're alive." "There's time for that," she said firmly, her tone carrying a quiet strength. "But first, you must know, the galaxy is not safe anymore, and I swore that if I ever found you again, I would stand by your side." The old man's heart twisted. He was no longer the strong captain she once followed. He was old, broken, his hands trembling, even holding a cane. Yet here she was, speaking as if nothing had changed, as if 15 years had not passed. He wanted to tell her to go, to leave him to his fading life. But the fire in her eyes stopped him. It was the same fire that had saved him all those years ago. The fire that once made her leap into danger without hesitation for the sake of her captain. Lightning cracked above, lighting the port in bright white for an instant. In that flash, he saw not just the girl from his memories, but a warrior who had survived alone for years. She had scars now, across her arms and neck, signs of battles fought without him. Yet she stood proud, ready to fight again, not for herself, but for him. For the old man she still called captain. He tried to speak, but his voice broke. His throat was too tight, his eyes burning. All he managed to whisper was her name, a name he hadn't spoken since the night he thought she died. Her lips trembled when she heard it, as if the sound of her name from him was the only proof she needed that this was real. She nodded quickly, tears mixing with the rain, and for a second her facade of strength cracked. Her hands clenched as if she feared he would walk away, leave her again. Instead, he let his cane fall into the water. With shaking hands, he reached out, touching her shoulder. Warmth. Real. Solid. She was alive. He closed his eyes as his body shook, not from the cold rain, but from the storm inside him. She did not move away. She stood still, letting him hold on to her, letting him believe. The spaceport noise slowly returned, ships taking off, announcements echoing through the speakers. People passed them by, not knowing that history had just turned in that moment. An old man had just been reunited with the soldier he thought he had lost forever. She straightened again, but her eyes never left his. "I am yours to command, Captain," she whispered, strong now, her voice steady as steel. And for the first time in 15 years, the old man felt the weight of command settle back on his shoulders. He did not know what storm was coming, but he knew one thing: he was not alone anymore. The old man could not sleep that night. The sound of the storm still echoed in his head, but louder than thunder was the voice of the alien girl saying, "It's an honor to serve you again, Captain." He sat in his small quarters, staring at the dim light above, his cane resting near his chair. Every breath felt heavy. For 15 years he had buried the past, told himself the crew was gone, told himself she was gone. And now suddenly, she had returned, alive. His mind would not stop replaying the last day he had seen her. 15 years ago, their ship had been falling apart. Fire burned through the corridors, alarms screaming as the hull cracked open. Enemy fighters circled like vultures, tearing at their shields. The crew was in chaos, some already dead, others barely holding the ship together. He was younger then, strong, barking orders, forcing his people to keep fighting. She was right beside him, quick and loyal, never questioning, always believing in his command. When the enemy breached the ship, it was she who stood at the front, her alien strength buying them minutes to escape. He remembered her pushing him toward the escape pod. "Go, Captain!" she had shouted over the roar of collapsing metal. He had refused, wanting to stay, wanting to fight with her. But she shoved him inside, sealing the hatch before he could stop her. Through the small glass window, he had seen her face, determined, unafraid, ready to die for him. Then fire engulfed everything, and the pod launched into space. He screamed her name until his voice broke. After that, silence. Only wreckage spinning in the void. He never saw her again. The galaxy told him she was dead, and he believed it, because believing anything else would have been torture. Now she was alive. But how? That question burned inside him. What had she gone through all these years? Why had she stayed away? He thought of the medals, the ceremonies, the speeches about fallen heroes. Her name was carved into a memorial stone, honored as a soldier who gave her life. Yet she had been out there, living, unseen, unheard. He felt guilt choking him. He had let himself grow old, hiding from the war, while she had been fighting alone. As he sat in the dim room, he heard the soft knock at his door. He did not move at first, afraid it might be another ghost from his past. The knock came again, gentle but firm. Slowly, he rose with his cane and opened the door. She stood there, rain still in her hair, her clothes damp from the storm. For a moment, they just looked at each other in silence, like strangers bound by memories. Then she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the small room, her posture tense but respectful. "You still live like a soldier," she said quietly, noticing the plain bed, the neat table, the weapons locked away. Her voice carried sadness, as if she wished his life had been softer. He did not answer, only gestured for her to sit. She sat on the edge of the bed, her back straight, as if she was still reporting for duty. He lowered himself into the chair opposite her, the light between them flickering. Finally, he asked the question that had been burning inside him since the storm. "How are you alive?" She lowered her gaze, her hands clenched in her lap. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she spoke, her voice low. "I should have died that day. I thought I would. When the fire took the ship, I stayed behind to hold the enemy. The blast threw me into space. I was broken, half dead, drifting. But another ship found me. Not ours, not allies, slavers." His chest tightened. He gripped his cane until his knuckles turned white. She continued, her eyes shining with anger. "They chained me, sold me, passed me from one master to another. Years of it. I fought. I bled. I tried to escape. Sometimes I almost gave up. But the thought of you kept me alive. I told myself if I survived long enough, maybe one day I would see you again. The old man's throat burned. He wanted to shout, to rage at the cruelty she had endured, but all he managed was a whisper. I thought you were gone. I know, she said softly. I saw the memorials once when they took me to a trade world. Your name was still spoken with honor. Mine was written as dead. I wanted to reach you, but I was nothing more than property. I swore if I ever got free, I would find you. And now I have. Tears blurred his vision. He had commanded hundreds of soldiers in his life, but she had been different. She had trusted him when others doubted. She had stood by him even when the galaxy turned its back, and he had failed her, let her vanish into the darkness. He rubbed his face with a trembling hand, trying to steady himself. You should hate me, he said hoarsely. I left you behind. She shook her head sharply. No, you didn't leave me. You survived. That is all I wanted. If one of us had to live, it had to be you. You were the captain. You carried hope. I only carried loyalty. Her words stabbed deeper than any blade. For 15 years, he had believed himself cursed, a coward who escaped while his crew died. Now this girl, this woman, told him she had wanted him to live. He did not know whether to feel relief or more guilt. He leaned forward, his voice shaking. Why now? Why come back after so long? Her eyes darkened. Because the enemy we faced that day is rising again. I have seen their banners in the outer systems. They are gathering power, and I know they will come for you. They will come for all of us. His heart sank. He had hoped the wars were behind him, that his old bones could rest. But her words carried truth. She had survived hell. If she said danger was coming, he believed her. She stood, her figure tall, casting a long shadow in the dim light. You may be old, but you are still my captain, and I will not let you face what is coming alone. He looked at her, his chest heavy with fear and pride. 15 years ago, she had saved him with her sacrifice. Now, she had returned from the dead to stand with him again. For the first time in years, the fire of command stirred faintly inside him, whispering that his story was not finished yet. The next morning, the old man sat at the small table of his quarters, staring at the untouched cup of tea in front of him. His hands trembled as he tried to lift it, the steam rising and fading before his eyes. The night had given him no rest, only memories and her voice repeating over and over, warning him that the galaxy was not safe anymore. His bones ached, his body weak, but his mind was caught between disbelief and fear. He had spent years hiding from war, burying the past. Now the past had found him again in the form of the girl he once thought dead. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and she entered without waiting for permission. Her steps were silent but firm, her presence filling the small room. She no longer looked like a girl. Her posture and scars told a story of survival and battles fought alone. She glanced at the untouched tea and then at him. Her voice was steady, but carried an urgency that could not be ignored. You have to listen to me, Captain. What is coming is bigger than both of us. He looked up at her, his eyes weary. I am no captain anymore. I'm an old man. My fight is done. Her expression hardened. You think you can walk away from this? You think age makes you safe? They don't forget, Captain. The ones we fought that day, they remember you. They have been waiting, gathering strength. I've seen it with my own eyes. He shook his head slowly, his cane leaning against the table. Even if it's true, what do you expect me to do? My body is failing me. I can't fight, not like before. She stepped closer, her fists clenched. You don't need to fight like before. You only need to lead. You always said a captain's duty is not his strength, but his mind. That's what saved us more than once. That's why I believed in you then. That's why I'm here now. The old man felt the weight of her words pressing against his heart. He remembered saying those things long ago, when his crew was young and alive. Back then, he had believed it. Now, looking at himself, he felt only weakness. Times have changed, he muttered. She leaned forward, her eyes burning with fire. No, times have not changed. The galaxy still needs you. I need you. Her voice cracked on the last words, and for a brief moment, the soldier's mask she wore slipped, showing the same girl who once stood beside him on a burning ship, begging him to live. He closed his eyes, struggling against the tide of emotions. He wanted to refuse, to send her away, to return to his quiet life. But every time he tried, he saw the look in her eyes, the faith that had never left her. He opened them again and whispered, Why me? There must be others, younger, stronger. There are none like you, she said firmly. You faced them once and survived. That makes you the only one they fear, the only one who can stop them again. I've carried this warning for years, waiting for the chance to tell you. Don't make me regret surviving. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. The old man's fingers tapped against the table, his mind torn apart by doubt. Part of him longed to remain hidden, to fade away in peace. But another part, buried deep and long ignored, began to stir. The part that had once commanded ships, inspired loyalty, and faced enemies greater than himself. She straightened her back and spoke again, her voice quieter but sharper, like a blade. If you refuse, then I will go alone. I've fought alone for years, but if I go without you, I will die, and so will countless others. You know it's true. His chest tightened. He had lost too many already. The thought of losing her again, after finally finding her, was unbearable. He pushed his chair back with effort, standing on shaky legs. His cane wobbled under his weight, but he did not fall. He looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. If I say yes, if I try, there's no going back. You understand that? She nodded without hesitation. I understand. I was ready the day I first swore to serve you. I am ready now. The old man exhaled slowly, the breath rattling in his chest. He walked to the small cabinet against the wall and opened it. Inside, wrapped in old cloth, lay a relic of his past, a pistol, simple but well kept, the last weapon he had carried before he laid down his command. His hand trembled as he touched it, not from fear of using it, but from the weight of memories it carried. He held it for a moment, then set it down on the table with a heavy thud. Her eyes followed the movement, and for the first time since returning, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. It was not a smile of victory, but of relief, as if she had been holding her breath for years and could finally breathe. He met her gaze. If what you say is true, then we have little time. You will tell me everything, where you've been, what you've seen, who our enemy is, and then we will decide our next step. She bowed her head, her voice soft but full of strength. Yes, Captain. The word struck him again, deep in his chest. For years, no one had called him that. The sound of it now felt both heavy and alive, dragging him back into a role he thought he had left forever. He looked at her, seeing not just the scars of her survival, but the loyalty that had never died. Outside, the storm had calmed, leaving the air heavy and damp. The spaceport was alive with noise, ships rising and landing, unaware of the silent promise made in the small room. The old man sat once more, his hand resting on the pistol, while the alien girl began to speak. Her words painted a picture of darkness spreading across the stars, an enemy rising from shadows, stronger than ever. And though his body was weak, though his years were many, the old man felt something awaken inside him again. A fire he thought long dead flickered faintly to life. He did not know how long it would last, but he knew one thing. He could not let her face it alone. The alien girl sat across from him, her eyes steady but shadowed with pain that no soldier should have carried alone. The old man leaned on his cane, the pistol still lying on the table between them, and waited. She took a long breath, her hands curling into fists as if holding back memories too heavy to share. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but unshaking. You asked why I never returned, why I disappeared. The truth is not easy, Captain. He said nothing, only nodded, urging her to continue. When the blast threw me into space, I thought it was the end. I drifted for hours, maybe days. I don't know. But a ship found me, my own people's ship. Her lips trembled with bitter anger. They saw me, they recognized me, and instead of saving me, they left me. They marked me as already dead. Do you understand? To them, I was nothing, not worth the risk. They abandoned me in the dark. The old man's jaw tightened. Betrayal was a wound that cut deeper than any weapon, and he could see how it had scarred her. He wanted to speak, but her eyes held him silent. I would have died there if not for a scavenger crew, she continued. They pulled me aboard, patched me just enough to live, but I was weak, broken, and to them I was only cargo to be sold. From that day on, I was no longer a soldier of my people. I was a prize, a tool, a slave, and while I was traded across the stars, my own kind celebrated me as a fallen hero. They honored a ghost while letting the real me rot in chains. Her voice cracked at the last words, but she steadied herself quickly, lifting her chin as if daring the memories to defeat her. The old man gripped his cane so tightly his knuckles turned white. He could almost feel her pain as his own, and anger burned inside him, sharp and fierce. I tried to escape many times, she went on, her gaze far away now, seeing not the small room but the endless years behind her. Sometimes I almost made it. Once I stole a ship, flew it for 3 days before they caught me. Every time I swore I would never stop trying, because I could not believe it was over. I could not accept that the galaxy had thrown me away. I told myself one thing over and over: find him. Find the captain. If I can find him, I will belong somewhere again. Her eyes turned back to him then, sharp and burning with truth. You were the only reason I kept breathing. The old man felt his throat close. He had thought himself broken by guilt, but her words tore through him in a way nothing else could. He wanted to argue, to tell her she should have lived for herself, not for him. But her eyes made it clear. Without that single promise, she would not have survived. He lowered his gaze, ashamed. I thought you were dead. I let them carve your name in stone. I let them speak of you as a hero. And all that time you were suffering. I should have known. I should have looked harder. Her expression softened, the hard lines of bitterness fading into something gentler. No, Captain. You couldn't have known. And I don't blame you. The blame belongs to them, my people who abandoned me, the slavers who chained me, not you. He looked up, and in her face he saw not accusation, but loyalty. Loyalty that had survived the worst cruelty. It stunned him. She should have hated him, yet here she was, still calling him captain. She leaned forward, her voice growing quiet, as if the shadows themselves might be listening. There is something else, something I never told anyone. The ones who left me, they were ordered to. My superiors, the high command. They saw me as expendable, a distraction while they retreated. They made sure no rescue was attempted. To them, I was nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded. The old man's chest ached with fury. He slammed his hand against the table, making the pistol jump. Cowards, he hissed. They betrayed their own soldier, their own blood. She nodded, her eyes glistening but steady. Yes, that is why I trust no one now. No government, no command, no species. I only trust you. Because when the fire came that day, you were ready to die with me. You were the only one who never abandoned me. The room was silent, except for the hum of the spaceport beyond. The old man felt the years pressing on him, every failure, every loss. But he also felt her faith, heavy and unbreakable, pressing against his heart. Slowly, he reached out and placed his trembling hand over hers. Her skin was warm, alive, real. She did not pull away. You should not have had to endure that, he said, his voice rough. But if you still trust me after all of it, then I swear I will not fail you again. For a moment, she simply looked at him, her lips parting as if words were too small for what she felt. Then she nodded, a single sharp movement like a soldier receiving orders. But in her eyes, there was relief, as if a chain she had carried for years had just grown lighter. Outside, the spaceport lights flickered and a ship's engines roared as it lifted into the dark sky. The old man glanced at the sound and then back at her. He realized that she had not only returned to warn him of danger. She had returned because she had no one else left. He was her only anchor in a galaxy that had betrayed her. He leaned back slowly, his heart pounding despite his age. He understood now that this was no ordinary reunion. This was a bond forged in fire, betrayal, and survival. And if she was right, if the enemy was rising again, then he could not ignore it. Not for himself. Not for her. Her words echoed in his mind. I only trust you. The fire inside him, long buried under years of silence, sparked again. And this time, he knew he could not let it die. The old man stood at the edge of the hangar, his cane tapping against the steel floor as he watched the ship before him. It was small, patched together from old parts, but still strong enough to fly. For years he had avoided this place, choosing silence over the roar of engines, peace over the chaos of space. But now, with her standing beside him, the quiet life felt like a cage, and the galaxy beyond those doors called to him again. The alien girl looked at him, her eyes shining with determination. She wore new armor, not fancy, just practical, shaped from the scraps she had collected during her years of survival. It fit her like a second skin, every scar on her body speaking louder than words. She moved like someone who had carried war on her shoulders alone. Yet when she stood near him, her posture softened, her head tilting slightly as if waiting for his command. You don't have to do this, he muttered, his voice hoarse. I'm too old. You've already survived more than I could. You don't need me slowing you down. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, one filled with both sorrow and loyalty. You're wrong, Captain. I survived because of you. Every choice I made, every fight I lived through, it was because I remembered your words, your courage. You once told me, a captain doesn't abandon his crew. You are still my captain, whether you want to be or not. The words hit him harder than any weapon. He turned his gaze back to the ship, the storm of doubt raging inside him. His body was weak, his hands shaking even when he gripped the cane, but he could not deny the fire in her eyes. It was the same fire she had carried all those years ago when she had pushed him into the escape pod. And if she could believe in him still, then maybe he could try to believe in himself again. They walked slowly into the ship. The air inside was stale, the panels scratched and dented, but everything was functional. She moved with ease, flicking switches, checking systems, her hands steady and practiced. He followed, lowering himself carefully into the captain's chair. It felt strange, almost wrong, to sit there again. His back hurt, his legs stiff, but the seat carried memories that made him feel alive. He ran his hand across the old controls, remembering battles fought, stars crossed, victories and failures alike. She stopped her work for a moment and looked at him. It suits you, she said softly. He let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. It feels heavier than I remember. Because you carry more now, she answered. Not just your crew, not just a mission. You carry time, regret, hope, and me. Her honesty struck him silent. He lowered his gaze, trying to swallow the tightness in his throat. She sat in the co-pilot's chair, close enough that he could see every scar etched across her skin. Each one was a reminder of years lost, years she should never have had to endure. And yet, instead of breaking her, those scars had forged her into steel. As the engines hummed to life, the old man felt the vibration through his bones. He had forgotten the sound, the rhythm of a ship waking from sleep. The hangar doors opened slowly, revealing the endless stretch of stars waiting beyond. His heart raced. He told himself it was fear, but deep down he knew it was something else, something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Before they lifted off, she turned to him, her expression hardening. The moment we leave, there's no turning back. You know that, don't you? He nodded, his jaw tight. I know. Then say it, she urged. Her voice was steady, demanding. Say you're the captain again. Say it so I can believe. His breath shook in his chest. For so long he had buried that part of himself, convinced it was gone forever. But as he looked at her, this soldier who had been betrayed, enslaved, beaten, and yet still stood by his side, he felt the weight of silence break. His lips trembled, but he forced the words out, each one heavy with meaning. I am the captain. Her eyes softened, and for the first time since she had returned, tears slipped free down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly, but her voice cracked when she answered. Then I am your soldier. The ship rose slowly, the floor trembling beneath them as it lifted off the ground. The hangar shrank away, and the sky opened wide, filled with stars and shadows. The old man gripped the controls, his hands shaking but steady enough to guide the ship forward. He was not the man he once was, but he was not finished either. As they cut through the atmosphere and into the darkness of space, silence fell between them. It was not the silence of doubt, but of understanding. Both knew what awaited them would not be easy. Both knew the enemy gathering in the shadows was stronger than before. But they also knew something else. Neither of them would face it alone. He looked at her, and she met his gaze with unbreakable loyalty. In that moment, he understood that she had not only returned to warn him of danger. She had returned to remind him of who he truly was. The galaxy might see him as an old man, but to her, he was still the captain worth following into fire. The stars stretched out before them, endless and unforgiving. The ship's engines roared, carrying them into the unknown. And in that fragile but powerful moment, the old man felt something he thought was lost forever, a second chance. The stars outside the ship's window drifted slowly as the old man sat in silence, his hands resting on the controls. His cane lay at his side, forgotten for the moment, though his body still ached with every breath. The alien girl worked at the console beside him, her fingers flying across the screens as she pulled up maps and signals she had stored from her long years of survival. Her face was lit by the glow of the monitors, sharp and determined. But when she looked at him, her eyes softened with something far more fragile: trust. Finally, she pointed at a blinking symbol on the map. "This is where they gather," she said, her voice calm but edged with fire. 15 years ago, they lost because of you. You destroyed their fleet, cost them their pride. They swore they would rise again, and they have. They are building armies here, in the shadow of dead stars. They speak your name with hate. To them, you are not forgotten. You are unfinished business. The old man leaned back in his chair, his chest heavy with both dread and pride. "So the warlord lives?" he muttered. "I should have finished him then." She shook her head, her jaw tight. "He is not just alive, he is stronger. His fleets are larger, his reach wider. Entire systems bow to him now, out of fear or greed. And he wants more. He wants to erase every trace of those who once defied him. That is why he will come for you." The old man stared at the blinking red light on the map. It seemed so small, so harmless, and yet it carried the weight of a storm ready to break across the galaxy. His hands trembled slightly, but not from weakness this time. From rage, from the fire slowly crawling back into his chest. "You've seen him," he said quietly, his eyes narrowing. She nodded, her voice lower now. "I have stood in his shadow. I escaped his prisons twice. I saw what he does to those who resist. He breaks them, burns their homes, turns survivors into slaves. I watched him kill children just to make their fathers kneel. He is no leader. He is a plague. And unless someone stops him, he will spread until nothing is left." The old man gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles pale. His voice was rough, broken, but steady. "And you think I can stop him? Look at me. I can barely walk without a cane." She turned toward him, her eyes burning with fierce loyalty. "It is not your body he fears, Captain. It is your mind. The way you see battles before they begin. The way you make others believe they can win even when the odds are against them. That is what he remembers. That is what haunts him. He has strength, but he does not have you." Her words cut deep, not because they were sweet, but because they were true. He remembered the warlord well, the arrogance in his eyes, the way he laughed when victory seemed certain, the shock on his face when defeat came instead. That defeat had been the old man's doing. Not by strength, not by speed, but by strategy. He had made the impossible possible. And now the same enemy had returned, larger and angrier. Silence hung heavy in the cabin. The hum of the engines filled the air, steady and patient, waiting for his choice. He closed his eyes, letting the darkness wash over him. Images came unbidden, his crew, their laughter, their screams, the girl's face disappearing in fire. The guilt of years weighed on him, but beneath it all, something else stirred. He was not dead yet. And as long as he breathed, he could fight. When he opened his eyes again, they were sharper, colder. He looked at her, and for the first time since their reunion, his voice carried command. "If he has risen again, then we end this. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now, before his fire spreads too far." Her chest rose quickly, as if she had been holding her breath for those words. She nodded, her lips trembling with relief. "Yes, Captain." He leaned forward, studying the map. "We cannot strike alone. One ship will not win this. We need allies, old friends, new blood, anyone willing to fight. He expects me to be broken. He expects me to hide. But we will show him the galaxy is not his to claim." She smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet with emotion. "This is the captain I remembered." He exhaled slowly, his chest heavy with both pain and determination. "Don't mistake me for who I was. I am not young anymore. But maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe wisdom is the only weapon I have left. And maybe it is enough." For a moment, they sat together in silence, watching the stars stretch across the black void. The weight of what was coming pressed on them, but neither looked away. She had carried the burden of warning him for years, and now, at last, he had accepted it. The fight was no longer hers alone. The ship's lights flickered as systems adjusted for long-range travel. She stood and moved closer to him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. It was not the touch of a soldier to her commander, but of someone who had waited years to no longer be alone. He did not move away. Outside, the stars shifted as the ship changed course, the blinking red symbol on the map growing nearer. Somewhere in that shadow, the warlord waited, his fleets gathering like vultures circling a battlefield. He believed the galaxy was already his. He believed the captain of old was nothing but a faded memory. But as the engines roared and the stars bent around them, the old man allowed himself a grim smile. Let the warlord believe. Let him laugh. Soon he would see that memories can rise again, sharper than ever, carried not by youth, but by loyalty, by fire, by the bond between a captain and the soldier who never stopped believing in him. The storm was coming, and this time he would face it not as a forgotten old man, but as the captain once more. The ship shook with every blast as enemy fire lit up the darkness of space. Sirens screamed through the cabin, red lights flashing across the old man's worn face. His hands gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles pale, but his eyes were sharp, filled with a fire that had not burned in 15 long years. The alien girl moved beside him, her voice steady, even as the walls trembled. "Shields at 30%! We can't take another direct hit!" The old man's voice carried command, strong despite the rasp in his throat. "Divert power from the secondary engines. Keep the front shields alive. We only need enough time to close the gap." She obeyed instantly, her fingers flying across the console. The ship groaned in protest, but the shields flickered back to life just as another blast struck. Sparks flew across the cabin, filling the air with the smell of burning wires. She coughed but didn't stop working. He glanced at her briefly and saw the same determination she had carried the day she pushed him into the escape pod. The enemy fleet filled the space around them, ships dark and jagged, like vultures tearing apart the stars. At their center was the warlord's flagship, massive and cruel, its hull scarred with battles but stronger than ever. The old man stared at it, his jaw tight. "There he is," he muttered, "the one who should have been buried years ago." The girl followed his gaze, her voice heavy with hate. "He won't escape this time. I swear it." The old man's mind worked quickly, planning, calculating. Strength alone would not win this fight. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but battles were never about numbers. They were about choices. He had won impossible wars before, not with power, but with strategy. He tapped the screen, pulling up a display of the enemy formation. His eyes narrowed. They're leaving their flank exposed. He thinks we're too weak to matter. That arrogance will cost him. She smiled despite the danger, her eyes shining. "That's the captain I remember." He gave her a sharp look. "Then follow my orders without question. This is the final stand." Their ship dived, slipping between enemy fire, engines screaming under the strain. Fighters swarmed around them, but the old man's hands moved with precision, weaving through gaps where no sane pilot would dare. Each maneuver was a gamble, but every gamble worked. The alien girl manned the weapons, firing bursts of energy that tore through the smaller enemy ships. The cabin shook again as a blast grazed their side, but they pushed on. Finally, they broke through the swarm and faced the flagship head-on. The warlord's voice filled the comms, deep and cruel, echoing with laughter. "So the ghost of a broken captain returns. Do you think you can change fate, old man? You are nothing but dust clinging to life." The old man leaned forward, his voice calm but deadly. "Dust can still choke a beast." He cut the comms and turned to her. "Now, get us close." She nodded and pushed the engines to their limit. The ship roared, metal rattling as it surged forward. Enemy fire tore around them, explosions blinding their path, but they did not slow. Every second brought them closer to the heart of the flagship, closer to the warlord who had haunted both their lives. The girl's hands shook on the weapons, her breath ragged. "We won't survive a direct hit." The old man's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I survived because of you once. Today, we both survive, or neither of us does. Do you trust me?" Her chest tightened, but her answer came without hesitation. "Always." He smiled faintly, then gave the final order. "Target the core. Even if we fall, he falls with us." They fired. The blast tore into the flagship's weak flank, ripping open steel and fire. Alarms filled the enemy fleet as the massive ship lurched, flames bursting from its sides. The warlord's laughter turned into a roar of rage. He sent every remaining ship to crush them, but it was too late. The wound had been struck. The old man's ship shuddered violently, systems failing, smoke filling the cabin. The alien girl stumbled, falling against the console, her body aching. He pulled her back up with trembling strength, refusing to let her fall. "Stay with me," he barked. She coughed, blood on her lips, but her eyes burned with fire. "I'm not leaving you again." The flagship's core ignited, explosions racing across its massive frame. One after another, the lights on the enemy ships flickered and died as the fleet scattered in chaos. The old man's ship spun out of control, caught in the shockwave. Panels shattered, glass cracked, and the world became a storm of light and sound. For a moment, everything went still. Only the sound of shallow breaths remained. The old man turned his head and saw her beside him, alive but barely conscious. He reached out and touched her hand. "You saved me then. You saved me now." Her lips moved weakly, but he heard the words. "It's an honor to serve you, Captain." The old man closed his eyes, relief washing over him. They had done it, together. The galaxy might never know their struggle, might never carve new statues, or speak of this battle in songs. But it did not matter. What mattered was that the warlord was gone, and she was still alive by his side. Rescue ships arrived hours later, drawn by the wreckage and the fading signals of war. They found the old man and the alien girl together, battered but alive, the last survivors of a battle that would change the galaxy's balance forever. When they carried them out, people whispered in awe. The captain had returned, and his soldier had stood with him till the end. As the stars stretched across the sky, the old man looked once more at her, and she met his gaze with a faint, tired smile. They both knew their fight was not over. There would always be more battles, more enemies. But they also knew something greater. After 15 years of separation, betrayal, and pain, they had found each other again. And no matter what came next, they would face it side by side.